And he's going to start by talking about free, fair, and accessible elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I want to start by putting in a plug for the League's legislative newsletter. I'm on the Auditor's legislative committee, and we get a newsletter about what's going on in the legislature, and I find myself going to the League's newsletter because there's a lot of overlap about things auditors care about and things that the League cares about, and it's a lot clearer and it's a lot easier to use than what I get from my fellow auditors. So I want to start by talking a little bit about, give you the 1-minute bio of Paddy McGuire. If you don't know me, I've been doing elections work for almost 20 years. I was Deputy Secretary of State in Oregon and oversaw the implementation of vote by mail there. I then went on to work in Washington, D.C. for the Department of Defense for the Federal Voting Assistance Program, which is the agency that makes sure that service people and their families and citizens living overseas get to vote wherever they are in the world. This is sort of like almost everybody in the elections business. I stumbled into this, and I won't tell that story, but I mean, little kids don't grow up dreaming of being elections officials, and I can't imagine why not. But it has been a passion of mine and my life's work for the past 20 years, and so I want to talk a little bit about start out by laying some groundwork here, and I say our elections are fairly safe, and that's, you know, there are all sorts of computer systems involved in elections. We base our elections on here almost exclusively on paper ballots filled out by human beings without the intervention of systems. But then there are all these systems that are used to keep track of those voters and to count those ballots. And there is no such thing as a completely safe computer system. As a former federal employee, you know, I have had all my personnel records hacked into by the Chinese in the Federal Office of Personnel Management, and so, you know, everything is potentially hackable. What we have to do in the elections world is do everything we can to ensure that that doesn't happen. And I think about three things when I think about safe elections. It's good people, it's good systems, and it's good processes. And if you don't do any of them, if you don't do one of those things, it can all go bad. We have great people in Mason County. If you haven't, and yeah, hats off to my friend Karen Herr. I can take no credit for hiring these people. My predecessor Karen Herr is responsible for about 90% of what I'm going to talk about here. And you know, we are very lucky here in Mason County to have a dedicated staff, and they work really, really hard to make sure that we're doing things right. And I'm excited to say that I'm getting a 50% increase in my election staff. We're going from 2 to 3, and we're in the process of reviewing resumes and applications right now to add a third person to the staff. I think, you know, I went to the commission shortly after I was sworn in and said that having an election staff of 2 was untenable, and you know, having a situation where if somebody is on vacation and somebody goes to the bathroom and there's nobody there, you know, that is no way to run a government. And happily, the financial condition of the county has improved to the point that I was able to get the commission to go along with that. Good systems. Karen picked, we replaced our election, our voting system, the system that counts the ballots, produces the ballots, and counts the ballots. We replaced that last year. Karen selected Clear Ballot, a company out of Boston, and it is the state of the art. It's the best computer computer system there is. It was originally developed as an audit tool to take ballots counted on another system and run them through a clear ballot system to see that the first system counted accurately. And there's all sorts of crazy marks here. What it was designed to do was to look at all the wacky things that voters do, and I can tell you that voters do all sorts of wacky things on their ballot, to take all the wacky things that voters do and turn that into something you can count. And it was such a good audit tool that they said, well, shoot, this is counting more accurately than anything else on the market, so why don't we just sell it as a tool to count ballots? It's an awesome system. It is, we're in the process of learning how to use a new system, and that's always a challenge. But I am convinced it's the best system there is. And the third thing is good processes. And this is the things you do in the office to make sure that you are doing what you can humanly do to protect that system. It's things like making sure that no one person is ever alone with ballots. You don't do that. It is making sure that there are seals on every case and everything that ballots are stored in, so that you can know if something's happened, and you can be assured that if the seals aren't broken, that nothing's been tampered with. It's about making sure that critical systems aren't connected to the internet. So the computer that actually counts the ballots, that is used to count the ballots, and a word about the clear ballot system, it uses off-the-shelf hardware. Most computer systems from the big vendors, you have to buy their scanner, and you have to buy their proprietary equipment. Clear Ballot is unique that you can go to Office Depot and buy a new scanner and plug it in and it'll work. But the brains of the system, the computer that the brains of the system are on, is not connected to the internet. So to access that, when you hear people talking about hacking into elections, well, to do that, you would have to physically have access to our ballot processing room and go in there and get the computer, and be able to turn it on, be able to log in, be able to do all those things. And that's a big part of election management, and assuring that systems are safe and secure is physical security of the equipment. So that's something we do. It's also about making sure, for example, that if you use a thumb drive to take information from the counting equipment and put it into a different computer that is connected to the internet so that you can display the results on the web, that those thumb drives are going one way and not both back and forth, right? So you use it once, you stick it in, you get the results out, you take it in, and you put it in a different computer that's connected to the internet so we can display the information on the web and people can find out who won, but you don't go backwards. Because this computer is connected to the internet, and so, unless somebody has the ability to break into Staples or Office Depot and hack into every random thumb drive that we take off the shelf, it is inconceivable. So that's a big part of election process security, and it's just being learned. It's being smart. It's anticipating problems, and I'll get back to this a little more in a minute. But staying alert is a really important part of what we do. There's a bunch of new stuff coming to the elections world, mostly passed last year during the legislative session to make it easier for people to participate. We are getting what the legislature calls automatic voter registration. I describe it as automatic-ish because There is a difference, there's a fundamental difference between what we're doing here in Washington State and what's happening in most of the other states that are implementing automatic voter registration, and that's because of the driver's license. Because we have two kinds of driver's licenses here. There's what probably 95% of the people in the room have is a standard driver's license, which when you get a standard driver's license in Washington State, you don't have to establish your citizenship. The enhanced driver's license, which soon we're going to need to get on an airplane, to get the enhanced driver's license, you need to prove your citizenship. In Oregon, for example, the first state to adopt automatic voter registration, there is no distinction. You have to, and for about 10 years, you have had to get a driver's license, go in and establish whether you are a citizen or not. And so there's 10 years of information there that you can go through the voter registration or go through the driver's license record and tell who's a citizen and who's not a citizen. We don't have that. The way that the Department of Licensing is going to do automatic-ish registration is to allow people to opt out. So they're going to, if you get a regular driver's license, they're going to say, so tell me if you don't want to be registered to vote. I mean, currently they say, tell me if you do want to register to vote. And that, I mean, it's basically the same question asked. So, I mean, I am not convinced, I think it's great, I am not convinced that it's going to result in the significant increase that Oregon and other states that have seen this have seen in voter registration. Here are the states that have adopted automatic voter registration. Originally, this was exclusively blue, politically blue states, even though all the states on the map are blue, but it has now expanded. Alaska, certainly no blue state, though again, it's blue state on the map. Georgia, red to purple state, West Virginia, increasingly red state. So it's starting to spread beyond just the sort of lefty states where, here along the left coast, where this started. Same day registration, so beginning at the our next election in August, you're going to be able to walk into my office at 7:59 p.m. on election day and register to vote and get a ballot. This is a new thing. You are still going to have to swear that you have been a Washington State resident for 30 days. That hasn't changed. That's a constitutional requirement and can't be waived by the legislature. But you will not have to have been registered to vote for 30 days. You know, I presume in the August primary, we're going to see 3 people, 5 people, something like that. November, maybe 10. You know, presidential election, the presidential preference primary, the presidential election, you know, I have absolutely no idea whether we're going to see 10 people or 1,000. And I have absolutely no way to plan for that, except we're going to have to, it will be all hands on deck. I'll have everybody in the office and we'll serve everybody who comes to the door, because that's what we do. But you know, from a management standpoint, from a planning standpoint, it's kind of terrifying because without any experience in this, just don't know. Yes?
Could the league help you out that day?
Sure.
You can have a
Fill out one of these sign-up sheets.
table outside your office to register and then just hand you the...
We need people to come to the counter, but you know, we can talk about this more, but you know, to have people working the line and make sure that people have what they need and know what they need to do, and you know, maybe have the form filled out before they get to the head of the line.
I
And
think that's a
those
great
sorts of
idea
things.
for us.
Because you know, they have to physically come to the counter. We have to physically check on the computer computer system. We're getting a new statewide voter registration system that I'll get to in a second. But because we have to make sure that they aren't registered somewhere else and haven't voted somewhere else, because you can't do that sort of thing. So it is, but yeah, we can definitely. As I mentioned, VoteWise is a new statewide voter registration system. This is kind of back to the future for me, because when I was in Oregon in 2003, we built a statewide voter registration system. And without getting completely deep in the weeds, there are two kinds of statewide vote. The Help America Vote Act required states to have a statewide voter registration system. In Oregon, we built a top-down system, so there was one state system and all the counties ran off of it. Here, they built a bottom-up system where the counties kept their own data and merged it together at the Secretary of State's office. Washington is now going to the top-down model. So we will have one statewide voter registration and election management system for the state. This is like completely geek, election geek guy thing for me. One of the cool things is that instead of being based on a table of addresses, it's now going to be GIS-based dots on a map to keep track of people, which is going to be great for people with non-traditional addresses, people homeless, people. If somebody comes in and says, you know, I live under the overpass on Highway 101, or Highway 101 and Highway 3 come together, we can drop a dot there and get them in the right district. The system will do that automatically. It's pretty cool. It's complete geek stuff. But I want to talk for a minute about what I would sleep over as an election official. And this is, we're not getting too deep into my psyche here, but with vote by mail, we depend almost entirely on signatures for security. Young people don't sign anything anymore. My daughter lives in Houston, just 29 years old, just bought a condo. Did not sign a piece of paper. She was able to finance, buy property, do all that, all e-sign. There was no ink involved. I mean, last time I bought a house, my hand ached for a week from having to sign things. You don't do that anymore. Young people don't sign things. There's, and when you don't sign things, being consistent about how you sign things is a real problem. And if the signatures don't match, we don't count the ballot. Right? I mean, that's the basis of vote by mail is you sign a card, and then you sign the envelope on your ballot, and if those things match, you're done. But if you sign one thing every 2 years, the likelihood that they're going to match is really small. And our whole system is built on signatures, and we're going to have to figure this out. I don't know what the answer is, but we're going to have to figure this out. Part of the answer may be this. I like this slide a lot because this guy, Matt Bomer, I used to work for him. And he's the model. His picture, there are pictures of CAC cards in every airport in America, and so wherever I travel, I'll find the poster and take a picture and text it to him. But so every Department of Defense employee and for service members, their family members gets CAC card. This is a chip that reads in your computer. There's a magnetic strip on the back. When I got my CAC card, when I went to work for the Department of Defense, they did a retinal scan. It had my fingerprints in there. I mean, there's so much stinking data stored in that thing. A service member could use that to file their taxes without a signature. But, I don't know what the answer is here, but we are going to have to figure out a way to identify people without signatures, because signatures aren't a thing for young people. And on young people, We need to figure out how to hold elections where young people are. And that is in the virtual world. And this scares me to death. But we're going to have to figure it out. And we're not going to solve this here in Mason County. We're not going to solve this in Washington State. It's going to take a federal investment, and the Congress giving $1 billion to somebody like NIST. And NIST is very involved in elections. And there are some, okay, I'm going to digress here. If you ever have a chance to have lunch in the NIST cafeteria, it is the most bizarre. It's like in Star Wars, you know, the cantina in Star Wars. It's just like that. You know, like these incredibly brilliant people with no social skills.
Washington D.C. in general.
Yeah, well, yeah. It is like, yeah, on steroids. So, I mean, it is going to take some super smart people at NIST or somewhere like that to figure this out. How we can have elections without paper, virtually, or we're going to lose people. I mean, increasingly, you know, every year the age of digital people gets a year older, and they get to be a larger percentage of the electorate. And, you know, telling them they need to find a blue pen and a stamp, and even with prepaid postage, even, you know, figuring out where to put mail to have something taken away. I mean, you know, it's like not a thing. And we're just going to have to figure this out. And it scares me. I don't go into this with, you know, blinders on that we could do this tomorrow, because we can't. But if we don't start thinking about it and don't start pushing our elected officials to do something about it, I mean Congress, not me, and making the investment, you know, we're going to get to the point where nobody under 50 votes because they don't know how the mail works. And the other thing I worry about a lot is public confidence. And I love this quote. And there's this picture. Yeah, sure. In a democracy, someone who fails to get elected to office can always console himself with the thought that there was something not quite fair about it. 411 BC. Okay, not a new problem.
And you said that to Trump?
Well, which takes you to my next slide. You know, and this one, you know, this one just kills me. The ballots keep showing up. Well, that's kind of how the mail works. And then, you know, and I think to some extent the press is complicit in this. This headline was actually changed because the first headline, this is a correction at the bottom of the story. What? Hack replicas of the state election website, not voting machines. So originally when they posted the story, they said that 10-year-olds or 8-year-olds or whatever it is were hacking voting machines. This was at the hackathon, which is a big geek gathering. And what they did was they sat kids down at a computer and said, here's a replica of the Florida website, change the numbers. Well, okay. And that became 8-year-olds hack the election. Well, no. You know, I mean, if our website was hacked and somebody went in and changed the numbers, it would be bad. It would be embarrassing. It would hurt people's confidence in what we do. It would not change the outcome of the election. It didn't change the votes. It changed the website. But there are almost no reporters in the country that get election management. Pam Fessler with NPR is one of the few. She's fabulous. She goes to every elections conference. She also has 2 years off to write a book right now, which just makes me insane because the new person at NPR doesn't get it. So I am waiting for the day that Pam Fessler finishes her book and comes back to reporting this stuff. These kind of charges are so easy. In 2000, the 2000 general election, Oregon, when I was Deputy Secretary of State, Oregon was the third closest state in the nation. Nobody noticed because everybody was paying attention to Florida. But Al Gore ended up winning Oregon by about 0.2%. A couple days after the election, the Bush campaign went to the press and said, I can't even remember the number, 12,000, 20,000 people are suspected of voting illegally. And they gave us a list of people. Virtually all of them had a last name that ended in S or Z, like, Gonzalez or Martinez, something like that. And we gave it to the state police, and they went and talked to every one of these people, and there were 0 people who had voted illegally. That was reported in the Portland Oregonian on page C23, 9 months after the election. The story that there were illegal voters was on A1, above the fold. Nobody ever ran the headline election ran perfectly. And nobody ever will. So this, you can look into this. There are maybe 150 people out of this 95,000 who are illegally registered, maybe. But again, that's a headline from the New York Times. Let me shift gears for just a minute and talk about redistricting. And I'm going to step on Alison a little bit here, but we coordinated a little bit because I think this is pretty cool stuff. I want to define some terms. Attributes of redistricting. People talk about this stuff. Compact. Pretty clear what that means. Competitive. People talk about drawing competitive districts a lot as being a good thing. It's increasingly hard to draw competitive districts in this country because we're segregating ourselves, and I'll get back to that a little bit. Drawing a politically competitive district around Green Lake in Seattle, really hard. Really, really hard. But I think almost everybody agrees that that's something we should aspire to. Connects communities of interest. I'll tell a little story about that in a second. And contiguous. So let's start with compact. This is so there's this great resource at 538.com where you can look at a state's map and then ascribe different attributes to it, and it will draw congressional districts to do those things. So if you want to draw the most Republican districts, it will draw a map for you with the Republicans would win the most seats, or Democratic, or so this is the one for compact. Well, it doesn't really take geography into account. I mean, it's kind of interesting, but sort of doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's something people talk about. Competitive. This is drawn this way, the red district it would be usually Republican, there would be 1, usually Democratic, there would be 4, obviously around Puget Sound, and then we would have 5 politically competitive districts. Again, going from Spokane to whatever that is, Tri-Cities, I don't know. Ellensburg. Anyway, I want to tell a story about communities of interest. I did the legislative redistricting in Oregon in 2002. This is Highway 197 and 97. That's the Dalles up there. This is Bend down here. We had to draw a line between, draw legislative districts and put a line somewhere between the Dalles and Bend. You know, and how do you decide? There's a string of little towns, Culver, Metolius, Madras, over here Antelope, famous Antelope, Oregon, Maupin, Tye Valley. What we were able to do then was call the newspaper in the Dalles and call the newspaper in Bend and say, tell us what your circulation is in each of these towns. And using that, we drew the line here. More folks in Maupin read the Bend Bulletin than the Dalles, whatever it is. And in Tye Valley, people read the Dalles paper. You know, that was a way that was available to us in 2002 that isn't available to us today, because nobody reads papers. But a way to decide where to draw a line on the assumption that if I'm living in Maupin and I read the Bend Bulletin, I'm probably going to feel more comfortable in being represented by somebody connected to Bend than somebody connected to the Dalles. I mean, that was a way we used to determine communities of interest. I mean, it's a really interesting concept. Contiguous. Jefferson County, for us in Oregon, contiguous meant able to get there by road and without leaving the district. Jefferson County violates the contiguous. It is not a contiguous county because you've either got to go down here to get from here to here, you've either got to go down here or go up here. Elbridge Gary, not Jerry, it's Gary. He was governor of Massachusetts, went on to become vice president of the United States. Anybody know who was the president when Gary was vice president? James Madison. He drew a Senate district. This is Essex County, Massachusetts. Boston's right down here. There's Lynn. Boston's right down here. He drew this, and a cartoonist took it and said it looked like a salamander or a dragon. So we got the term gerrymander, which is now gerrymander. There you go. There's your history lesson. So I want to do a little game with redistricting. So here we have a community, and we have 100 precincts, and it's 40% yellow and 60% green. And we need to draw 5 districts. So one way would be to just slice up and down. Seems pretty fair. Though it's completely non-competitive, and it's not very compact. But it does kind of represent people there. Alternatively, you can draw the lines this way. And you get yellow wins 0, green wins 5. It's competitive because presumably the races are going to be about 60-40, assuming everybody votes with their color, and it's not very compact. Doing this to the yellow people is called cracking, because you crack their political base. You split it up. Here's another way to draw that. And here, our 40% yellow wins 3 seats. And our 60% green wins 2. 3 of these are competitive. These 3 are competitive because they're pretty closely divided. 2 are not competitive, and they're not compact at all. This is packing. So we pack all the green people into 2 districts because you concede that they're going to win them, and they're a majority, and so obviously they're going to win some seats. So we pack them in to districts. I mentioned this before. This is precinct data from 2016. In this country, we have segregated ourselves. People like living around people who are like that. And so, what has happened is in urban areas, this is a little deceiving because that's the Navajo and Hopi reservations. But mostly in urban areas, you have all the Democrats and the Republicans are spread across the rest of the country. So getting, and so this is actually a pretty accurate map of the way we are, right? And we live together. And so getting to competitive districts is a challenge. The courts are incredibly involved in redistricting, going back to Baker versus Carr, one person, one vote, those sorts of concepts. And the most interesting thing going on right now is the distinction between racial gerrymandering and political gerrymandering. So just this, if we are doing this for political purposes, the Supreme Court today would say that's okay. There's a case there now, and it may not be tomorrow, but today, and Alison will talk more about the legalisms of that, but right now, on a political basis, this is okay, but on a racial basis, it's illegal. Because we are cracking, because these yellow people, assuming they are a racial minority, are entitled to representation. And so doing this and keeping them in districts that they are going to lose every one is unconstitutional. So that sort of lays the groundwork on redistricting. Election officials love landslides, right? And it's, we don't care about the outcome, but really close elections are kind of agonizing. We just had an incredibly close election in the Pioneer School District in February, where the levy lost by 4 votes. We had 154 late ballots, which is about 5 times the number of late ballots that we would normally have in an election because of the snow. I know a whole bunch of my neighbors on Harstein Island put their ballot in the mailbox on Friday, and they didn't get picked up till Wednesday. And Wednesday is too late. I had a long conversation with the superintendent, the new superintendent, Pioneer, who's a great guy, and said, isn't there anything you can do? And I said, well, no. Other than tell people to vote early, we're serious when we say vote early. You've had the ballots for 2.5 weeks. You get 3 weeks. If you wait till the last moment, stuff happens.
That doesn't sound like a lot of consolation.
No, it sucks.
Yeah,
it sucks. This is my school district.
We knew it was going to snow,
But, the election officials also like bright lines.
Yeah.
And, I don't know on what basis I would say, well, geez, we should count these because they were probably meant to vote on time. I can tell you, we looked at, there were a few that came in without postmarks. When there's no postmark, you go by the signature. It's all laid out in regulations from the Secretary of State. In those cases, those ballots got counted because, I presume all of them were late, but the law says the first thing you look at is the postmark. And if there's no postmark, you look at the signature, the date that the ballot is signed.
But
there
a
were 5 or
late
6 ballots.
postmark
Late post, yeah, late is late.
So snow can decide on that.
Yeah, and whether, you know, we didn't count the ballot, we didn't count those 154 ballots, and we won't ever count those 154 ballots, so I don't know if it would have turned out differently. But I do know that when we first started counting ballots, the levy was losing by about 60 votes, and every time we counted ballots, it got closer. And then there were a bunch of ballots we didn't count, so, I mean, my guess.
Have you even counted them just to see?
I'm pretty sure the superintendent would have shot himself if we had called him and said, yeah, your levy really passed if we had only counted all the ballots.
Really, is that a bad idea? Is it
No,
see? I
no,
mean,
it's, they're disqualified, you shouldn't count.
Yeah, I don't want to know.
But I mean, the snow, you know, I mean, isn't that what caused?
Yeah, but, you know, and my mom, my mom was sick, and so I didn't, you know, where does it stop? Yeah, so I'll get my homework.
Where does it start? Where does it stop? Good question.
Okay, Greg.
You said there was no postmark, where did they come?
So, not every piece of mail gets a postmark. Some things come through the mail. So, drop boxes, we had somebody, despite the snow, we had somebody at every single drop box at 8 p.m. and locked it up and put a seal on it. And so, if you got there at 8:01 with a ballot in your hand, it did not go in the drop box. But those that came in the mail, we got mail Thursday, Friday, Monday. Almost all of those had postmarks. Of those 154, most were, well, they were all late postmarks. Not every piece of mail gets postmarked. So, so to get completely geeky here, first thing is postmark. Second thing is there's that little fluorescent barcode at the bottom. It has a date code in there. So that was the second thing we looked at. Third thing is we looked at the date. And I'm going over. And this is what, you know, this is the fear of election officials, is that we're ever going to have to do this. Thankfully, punch cards are gone. But, you know, that's sort of the enduring image of Florida in 2000. I grew up in a Coast Guard town. I love the Coast Guard. Semper Paratus is my motto in elections, always ready. And then to sort of overkill on the Coast Guard, this is the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Vigilant. And that's really what I go to bed with at night thinking about as an election official is being always ready and being always vigilant. So that's what I have to say. Alison, do you want to?
Yeah, let's use mine.
Since I'm over, should we wait for questions to the end? What do you want to do? Cindy, Alison?
I'm ready to go.
Let's
Okay.
hear Alison and then we'll have
Okay.
questions.
So I'm going to introduce Alison McCaffrey, who is a league member and Census and Redistricting Lobby Team Chair. And she'll be talking about census and redistricting.
You've heard me talk before at a convention or something. Cool, a handful of you. Excellent. Well, I got my start in redistricting. Thank you. Due to, believe it or not, my grandmother. Right? She was a legislator in the 1960s. And when she was 84, she had more to give to the world, and she wrote her book.
All right.
And it's a story, first-person narrative about her 10 years in the legislature. And what she did for the first 5 of them was redistrict Washington State for the first time since statehood. We were 7-1 lopsided because no one had bothered to redistrict. So when she called me up and said, "We only write a book," I said, "Sure, you're my grandmother. I'm not going to say no. What's it about?" "Oh, my time in the state legislature." And I said, "What? You were a legislator?" How could it be that a 30-year-old didn't know her head of the Department of Revenue after she was in the legislature. So super fun. So what I'm going to do in the next, I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes, is give you a taste of a talk that is 2 hours long. I do a workshop, and I'd love to come back and do the full workshop if you will have me, about the census and about redistricting. Paddy got us riled up on redistricting, but we're going to pause for a moment and talk census. So anybody know why? Why do we want to talk census before we talk redistricting?
Because it determines the voters.
It determines the voters?
It determines the number of voters.
Number of voters, yes,
Number of
perfect.
candidates you get.
Yeah. It determines the count of people in order to draw those lines. Just like Paddy was talking about in Oregon, right? You draw the lines because you want equal population in each district. Well, how do you have equal population if you don't know the population, right? So let's start with this, even further back. The U.S. Constitution, the founders of this country said, "We the people." But you have to implement that somehow. And you have to implement that through your voting rules and laws. And so redistricting and counting people in the census are fundamental to this ideal we have of we the people. So that's why it's so important. Okay, so what do you know about the census? What's going to happen?
People are going to knock on our doors and ask us if we live there.
Anyone having someone knock on their door?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, a couple. Yeah. Turns out, okay, what day did they knock on your door? Do you know?
April 1st.
April 1st is the official census day. Do you think they could go knock on 380 million households on one day? That would be ridiculous. So the census is mostly done in the past by paper. Most of us return our census forms and turn them in. So this idea that people are going and knocking on everybody's door is kind of a myth in its own sense. They're going to count 70% of the households without even trying. They're just going to send us stuff, and we're going to answer back, right? What's different about this upcoming census? Never been done before. Census. They want to ask about citizenship. They do, which you'll get in. How about the process of doing it? Email, you're getting close. It will be online for the first time in ever, right? They have created, when did they start working on the 2020 census? 2010. Officially it was 2012, right after they buttoned up the 2010 census, right? So I just put this picture up because it's kind of a misnomer. You are going to get a postcard that says, go to this website, answer the census. You're going to get something in the mail. If you haven't answered online, you get something in the mail. You can fill it out, return it in. You're going to get another postcard that says, oh, maybe you'd like to answer by the phone. Please call on the phone, and we'll help you answer your questions. Oh, you don't speak English? We are now available to have 23 different languages that you can call and answer, right? This is an amazing process. It's only a very small fraction of folks that are going to get the knock on the door. Okay, so I'm going to do this talk quick from a league advocacy standpoint. So here are the things that I'm going to cover. Support funding for the census. It's happening now. I'll talk a little bit more about it. Figure out how to outreach to those people who don't know about the census, don't know why the census is important. Figure out how to communicate that in languages that they can understand. And then, of course, organizing your community so that more people can do these first three things. Okay, so here's the Census Bureau's main policy. Count people where you live and sleep most of the time. So who are they counting? Is it just voters, as this lady thought? It's non-voters too, right? We got this guy here. How many people are eligible to vote but don't vote? Half. Yeah. Okay. How about college students. Yeah, where do they get counted with this policy?
At their college.
At college. How about people deployed overseas in the military? Turns out the military is really good at keeping records of where your home district is, so they get counted in their home district. How about prisoners?
At their prison.
At the prison. Yeah, and I'm going to talk about the prison shift a little bit because that's what the alert is this week that Amy mentioned. Okay, why is the census important? We talked about it a little bit. Besides redistricting. You know the other reason it's really important? Money, yes. So here are two main things. Allocate representation, money. And it's going to be close to $900 billion that's going to get populated. In Washington State, it's about $14 billion of federal money gets allocated. So if I am maybe an immigrant family and I'm renting an apartment and my landlord thinks there's 4 people in there, but there's really 10 of us because my sister moved in with her kids, what am I likely to say on my census form? I might say 4. When it comes to needing, because I'm a low-income household, needing food, needing assistance, all of that stuff, how many people am I needing that money for? 10. So see how it's really kind of tricky. You do want to answer correctly so that the money gets allocated to the people who need it for food, for housing, all those kinds of things. And don't forget, we also use the census for research, for businesses. Where's Walmart going to put its next store? Probably where the population is growing the fastest. So it's not just for these grandiose, voting representation stuff. It's also for so many other things. Nonprofits use it for trying to figure out where they're going to put their next effort based on population growth. How much does the census cost? Somebody throw a number out there.
10 billion.
10 billion, that's pretty darn close. Here's the numbers. So back in 1970, it was about $1 billion. Then it's been growing, because look, households have gone up. Households are almost at 142 million households now, right? So the red is, if we did the census the way we did the census in 2010, it would have cost us almost $18 billion. They dropped it down to about 12.5 with the new online technologies, and now with all the turmoil of the Census Bureau and the funding cuts and all of this stuff, it's back up to $15.6 billion. Most of that gets used between now and April of 2020. It's almost 70% of the money gets used in the next 2 years. So it's a lot, yeah.
How does the homeless get included in this count?
It's pretty hard to count, huh? No door to knock on.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm living in my car, where do I get counted? So the Census Bureau has thousands, I think it's over 3,000 partner organizations to actually go and do that and get an accurate count. So I know Seattle's got a big homeless count area. Do you guys have a homeless count?
Yes.
Nice. So the point in time counts, they're going to partner with folks who have done that to get that kind of estimates of where it is.
And
Turns out.
And so it will be included.
Yep,
in
absolutely.
there.
Absolutely. They have a whole department that is specifically dedicated to hard to count people. You know who else is hard to count? People who distrust the federal government. Right? They don't want to be counted or found. They usually live in rural areas, right? So there's lots of different kinds of people. If you don't speak English, if you're a kid, it's hard to count you. Yeah, all sorts of things. So that perfect lead up into this slide, which is censushardtocount.org. I think you can find it. And you can go up to any area, and this is showing who returns that initial response, who in this case will be online or mail, paper mail, right? So this is where those of us for who it's easy to fill out our census, first thing you should do, fill County, you guys have got the Skokomish, I got that right? Skokomish Reservation. 55% response rate. 72% Native American, right? So what is it? You guys might know, have connections to the tribal government. You might know why. How do we help? Turns out most of the rest of the area is up in the 85%. You're pretty good at returning it. So how do we help that population return it? So that no one has to go knock on their door or find out where they're living, right? So what are you gonna do first? Yeah.
Well, I would think, I know when they first brought out Medicaid, a lot of workers went and got homeless people on Medicaid using the internet and just getting the information from them, doing it for them. Can we do that with the census too? Go to the homeless people and say, let me help you do this.
Absolutely.
Because
Work
I
with your
think adding the
census.
internet could add more people that haven't been added for a long time.
Yep.
There's really
Work with your
a hope in that.
local census workers that they're hiring. Become one, especially if you have language skills. Become a census worker. Work with them. Partner as a volunteer. Form complete count committees to try to do this outreach and get folks there. So let's switch modes. Yeah, another question.
How would you reach tribal leadership around the importance of this process and build trust
Yes.
in their nation?
That's a really good question. And it only can be answered by the people here and the leaders of the tribes, right? I can't answer that. That is so local. Figure out who knows who's got connections, who's married across tribe and non-tribe lines, and where is that network? Know your community so that you can build that trust.
So I'll just add one side. My husband went to school with Squaxin boys, and he knows lots of Squaxins. So if you know kids who went to high school or grade school with Skokomish kids, they've grown up with those kids. They know them. They have an entree to that community because they're just kids running around, but now they're older. They all keep
You and I can't walk into their tribal community and say, this is important, right? It'll never work. But you've already, and that's perfect. Like, find people who went to school, right, folks? And figure out what is that. Maybe, your current elected officials probably have relationships into the tribal elected officials, tribal council. Yeah.
We all know a Skokomish tribal elder. Our past president was Lomri.
Nice.
If we want to
Start there.
connect with Roz, I'm sure she'd have some.
Perfect, yeah. So I would say get a group of you together that's really excited about making this work and change that number. Talk about a way you can measure, because by April 2021, you're going to know if you were successful. You're going to have that measure. They specifically made this a census tract. The reservation is a census tract. So I'm talking about a win. If you can move that even by a little bit, that'd be great. Okay, let's talk about a citizenship question. Here is the question on everybody's mind. This has been in the American Communities Survey, which is the statistical survey that the Census Bureau does every other year when they're not doing the census year, but has not been on the census since 1950. Now note, it does not ask if you are in the country legally or not. That's really important. It just says, are you a citizen or not? Okay, so how many court cases are active around this? You guys know? How many court cases are active? A lot, right? I think there's 7 that have been compiled into 3. California, New York, and Maryland. And we just got Maryland's judge's decision last week. And they also determined that the citizenship question is illegal. So now it goes to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is planning to hear oral arguments next week. It'll be fascinating what will happen. But people are scared. People do not want to answer the census, and that could be a problem. So either way the court case goes, we still have our work to do.
Well, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but the underrepresented, because they're afraid to be part of the census, are the ones who suffer from not having representation or the money they need for a social,
Absolutely, absolutely. The
safety net.
The most underrepresented are going to be the most hurt.
And I think that's what some folks are looking for.
Yeah, I think it's deliberate.
Perhaps.
Should that question be answered? Should we answer that question?
My wholehearted answer is yes. Bad data will be used by nefarious people in bad ways, right? You do not want that data to be bad. Puerto Rico just had a vote. We've got a voting expert here, right? Oh, they're announcing 97% of the people think that Puerto Rico should be, I forget which way it went, should be independent or something. Well, only the people who thought that way actually showed up to vote because they protested. The other side protested. But what do we hear in the news, right? So you want good data. So back to my premise. Get your census, once it becomes available, get your own census in, then go spend your time helping someone else or lots of other people have it in. Questions on the census?
So why would someone come to our door after we've sent in our form?
They should not. Okay. I think the only reason would be if it somehow got messed up.
Okay.
But if you are filling it out correctly and whatnot, there should be no reason someone would come to your door. Yeah.
Is there some kind of unofficial count of people who refuse to be counted?
Yes, the Census Bureau knows what their error margins are, right? So they know who hasn't been counted. And they spend the next year, so April 1st is the official census day, although they spend all of April doing it. So it's where you lived and slept on April 1st. They'll spend the whole another year because they don't have to actually officially commit to the numbers until the next April, figuring out what all those errors are and making corrections and doing sample surveys and all that kind of stuff. It's fascinating. So, what?
So they'd be the number would be known of the actual persons, they just wouldn't be.
You don't know who they are, right? White people are overcounted and black people are undercounted. So the actual number is actually pretty accurate, but maybe there's a little adjustment here. Yeah. Lots of detail you can dive into if you're interested. Okay, so back to advocacy stuff. Encourage your state legislators to vote for census outreach funding. All over the state, there are community organizations that are going to try to be reaching people who are most underrepresented, and that is equated to people who are most undercounted. So the Census Alliance is a new alliance that was formed. All communities of organizations led by people of color, supporting communities of color, Census Alliance, and they are asking for $20 million in the budget. It's active right now. We're sitting there debating it. Let your representatives know you want census funding and that community-based organizations should have funding. We talked about those outreach strategies. Get going. Form a complete count committee that is league members and non-league members. And yes, we are going to try to get anybody who isn't counted, homeless, Native Americans, get them counted. Okay, let's switch to redistricting, which is the drawing of the lines. So once we've got everybody counted, we draw the lines. Here's my activist agenda. We have a current bill on accurate redistricting, has to do with the prison. Encourage your representatives to vote for that. I know that Senator Sheldon already voted it down. So, interesting. You guys do have correctional facilities in your district. So it is controversial, right? Because you're going to lose those folks that are in that prison. They're going to be allocated to their home districts. What will that mean? There are ways to adjust funding. We should definitely advocate because you should get funding for supporting those folks. But perhaps the league's position is they should be counted in their home districts. So we're supporting that bill. Okay, anyone know what this is?
Who's going to win more representatives in Congress and all those?
Yeah, so this was the 2010, after the 2010 census, right? That number gets sent to the clerk of the house, and the clerk of the house does this magic with rounding and all this fancy stuff. It's amazing how much politics there are in rounding. And then decides how many votes in the US House each state gets, right? Remember, we gained a 10th seat in 2010, and we're pretty close, right? So all the orange districts lost a seat, all the blue districts gained a seat. Anyone want to see what it's projected to be for next time?
Yeah.
So here's the projection. Texas may gain 3. Florida may gain 2. We will most likely not change. We are growing. There will be 1 million more people in Washington state, but we're not growing as fast as lots of other areas. So what's the political implications of this? Electoral college, right? Those battleground states are losing electoral college counts. Now remember, this isn't in effect until 2022. So the electoral college will remain the same for the next presidential election. Okay, how many of you know how redistricting works in Washington state? Yay. Raise your hand. We have a commission. My grandmother advocated, actually the league has been advocating for a commission since 1930. My grandmother actually put in a bill in 1964 for a commission. We finally got a commission in 1983. So here's how it works. The leadership of the legislature, we call it the four corners, gets to choose their representative. So this is the commission from last go around. So 2011 commission, right? And then these 4 pick their non-voting chair. And she's kind of the administrative, non-partisan lead to make it all happen. Anybody see any problem with representation in this commission? What's the problem? The only woman there is the only one doesn't have a vote. Oh my goodness. Right, so they're all men. They're all pretty old. They're all white.
Old white guys.
All white.
No offense to any old white guys. There's a lack of balance.
This is not really representative. You can't tell, but if you know these folks, they're all from west of the mountains too. Yeah. So one of the big things the league's trying to do is influence, this time around, is influence the selection. Prove to each of the leadership that we can find women and people of color and people in Eastern Washington that would be dynamite candidates for the commission.
Yeah.
Help me. It's not easy, but we've got to do it. Past auditors, you know, they love this stuff. They'd be great. They know how the details, right? They love it. Right? Now, you've got to do the political dance, and they were non-political and they were auditors in some sense, right? But they're out there. There's a lot of women, former auditors. Yeah. Okay.
Alison, are they appointed?
Yeah.
They are appointed. So
Who appoints them?
the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, right? It is party leadership. By definition, it's the majority party and the next biggest party that's in our laws. Yeah.
Those 4 men are state legislators?
No.
They're not.
You cannot be an elected official for the past 2 years, and you can't be a lobbyist for
They
the
were
past year.
selected by state.
They were selected by elder, right, for the Republicans. Why wouldn't you pick, right? So we've got to influence them and have a media campaign and figure out how do we make it more tenable to have different representation.
Has there ever been a woman on the committee, on the?
There was
district?
one in
Just one?
the time before, yeah.
And how did that happen?
Democrats decided she was good, right? So you can go.
So a Democrat brought a woman.
Yeah, there it goes. Okay, we talked about the rules with Paddy, so I'm not going to go there. One point, we talked about communities of interest a little bit. It is not defined in law, so you can define it however you want. It could be people who love roses. Now, maybe not so politically, but anything you want can be a community of interest. But we who are thinking about drawing maps can't know what your community of interest are. You have to tell us. That's where the league is in a great position to go out and talk to people and let me know what are communities of interest. Who should we keep together? Should Bremerton be split up into 3 districts, or should it be 1 district in 1 district? You know, I don't know the details of what's going on in the 35th, but what should be included and what not. So I'll make that. Okay, I want to get into the courts just ever so slightly. There are 3 things that have been litigated in the courts: racial gerrymandering, prison gerrymandering, and partisan gerrymandering. So make sure you kind of have those. When people just throw around this word gerrymandering, right? There are 3 different kinds. So let's talk racial gerrymandering. You can't have a redistricting talk without some crazy maps, right? This is the North Carolina 12. It has been to the Supreme Court 5 times in the last decade. They keep saying, you are packing black people in this district. And they keep redrawing the district, and then they sue again, and you're still packing black people in the district. So this is the interesting case. So this last time they said, we're not packing black people, we're packing Democrats, because it's legal to pack Democrats. Right? Crazy. So we got back to North Carolina. Here's my absolute favorite district. This one's never been to court. This was created by civil rights activists. Anyone from Chicago? To know what's what? Civil rights activists to give Latinos in Illinois a voice in Congress. Wow. There's a Puerto Rican community here. There is a Mexican American community here. It is contiguous by Highway 294. You can drive to every point in the district, unlike Jefferson County, right? Never been to court. It elected good old Mr. Gutierrez 12 times to his seat in Congress by, I think, upwards of like 87% the last time. He decided not to run this time, and they elected Mr. Garcia at 67%, right? This is the Voting Rights Act at its best in some ways. People who never got a voice before now have a representative who understands their community in Congress.
Wow.
Is it gerrymandering?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the tricky thing about race, right? You have to do this balancing act. You take race into consideration. You don't want to pack or crack unknowingly, but it can't be too much. As someone who's trying to draw maps, this is tricky, right? You want people to have, the law says, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 says, you have to give people the opportunity to vote in the person they want. But you can't pack them all in one district so that you can't win that chamber. Tricky. Okay, here's prison. If you're interested in prison gerrymandering, this is the idea that prisoners are counted in prison. And where are most prisons? Rural areas. And where are most people in prison from? Cities. Right? So it's a classic dynamic throughout the country. Go to the Prison Gerrymandering Project. They have data and statistics, and they're tracking it. It's pretty amazing. Here's the bill that's in our current legislature. It and for the purposes of redistricting, count them in their home district. As a fair representation kind of organization, we are saying this is more representative. Those people's home districts kind of need the funding that their vote represents. If you think about the whole prison system stuff, right, that's a whole nother lecture. Let's count where their families are. Okay, so everybody's gonna go after this, go find the legislative newsletter, click on the link. I've got it all spelled out there for you. Send it to your representatives, that would be wonderful. Okay, let's talk partisan gerrymandering. So the main question is it constitutional and how much is too much? Right? We know, my grandmother, she says it over and over again, redistricting is the most partisan thing a legislator does. This is hard to find a compromise. Yeah, and she did it without computers. Okay, here's the rub. If the Republicans got 37% of the votes, what percentage of the seats would you like them to have?
39.
For the lead, let's be fair. 37% kind of makes sense, right? 48%. 48%. This is called proportionality, right? This proportion to this proportion are equal. Our districts do not work this way. We have single member, geographically based districts. They're called first past the post elections, right? You need 50% plus one voter and you get the whole thing. This inherently has a winner's advantage. The more votes you get, the more seats you're going to get. And there's data to back this up if you're interested. Here's the example of truly proportional representation. The Israeli parliament, Knesset. They are truly proportional. You do not vote for people, you vote for parties, and then the party decides the people that will fill those seats. So Netanyahu has 30 seats. His party, forget what it's called, won 30% of the vote. I'm sorry, 30, whatever percentage, it's 120, so whatever percentage of the vote that got him 30 seats, that's what his party won, so they give him 30 seats. This is not the way our system works, right? So we will never, we get close, because it turns out our elections are kind of in that range, just doesn't work that way. That's a key learning. Okay, here's our another Supreme Court case, partisan gerrymandering. This is the Republicans taking the Democrats to court because the 6th district here used to stop here. Clearly a Republican rural district. The Democrats in charge said, let's tack on suburbia Washington, D.C. We'll make it competitive. But then a Democrat has won 3 times in this district. So they heard oral arguments 3 weeks ago. It was really interesting. The justices were wrangling. Don't know how to judge how much is too much. And this one and the North Carolina case, here's North Carolina. 50% of the votes gets 10 seats. 48% of the votes gets 3 seats.
Whoa. What?
Yeah, it's our proportionality coming out again. Wait a minute.
That sounds like
How did 48% get 23%? So the Democrats took the Republicans to court, right? And this is the one where partisan intent was, remember what I said about the 12, which is somewhere? The main guy who was in charge of redistricting has on video, he was interviewed by a reporter, Mr. Legislator, why did you do 10 and 3? And his response, because I couldn't do 11 and 2.
oh, Lord.
Right? Clearly partisan intent. So that's why the Supreme Court decided to take these cases. intent, they have to figure out how much is too much. Here's a great example of Massachusetts. This idea of political geography and who we live in our groups. There are 30% Republicans in Massachusetts. They cannot elect a Republican congressperson because they're spread out. You cannot make a majority Republican district in Massachusetts. Turns out, I've done the analysis for Washington State. We are not this evenly spread, but we're not as bad as Texas. Texas, all the Democrats live in Austin, right? Right? It is so polarized. I have graphs that do population density by percentage Republican vote, right? The more linear that graph, the more compact it is. And we kind of have this sliding scale. So we do have some packing of ourselves as Democrats, but not too much. Okay, so I want to, in the few minutes I have left, I want to talk about how could you possibly decide how much is too much. So the Wisconsin case, been to the Supreme Court. You guys know they kicked the can down the road. They said, Matt, you go back. You don't have to stand it. But for the last 15 years, the social scientists have been working on how much is too much. So I want to show you 3 of the ways that they've tried to put before the court to say, we think this is clearly a Republican gerrymander, unconstitutional. Here's why we know it. So the first is basic statistics. Anyone a statistician and can explain even this to me? But you guys know median and mean, those terms, right? So the people in the know said, is there this geographic bias where Democrats pack themselves in cities, right? Madison, right? We're talking Wisconsin. Green Bay. Well, the statistician says, yes, there is a bias, but not as much as your maps make it out to be. That's what this statistics say. Then there was this measure that made all the news. Anyone heard of the efficiency gap? It was a measure, it's simple math. You take the number of votes from one side, the number of votes for the other side, and you get a percentage in the end. And I actually met Professor McGee, who invented this, and he argued it in front of the Supreme Court. It's kind of fun. He called me redistricting royalty. And, you know, it's a good, simple measure. It's not perfect, but it also says there is a bias, a Republican bias in Wisconsin, and therefore we should call this. And they actually had lines in the efficiency gap. So here's the efficiency gap for Washington, right? Here's the lines that Professor McGee set up. So we've actually been pretty good within his guidelines of what they should be. That's congressional seats. This is legislative seats. So I'm an engineer. I love geeky numbers, but we're not too bad in terms of this metric. Okay, then my favorite metric is just so amazing. We have computers now, supercomputers, networked computers. We can create millions and millions of variations of maps in a heartbeat, basically. My poor grandmother still had to have Shell gas station maps and draw them by hand, and every time a legislator wanted to move a line, she'd get a new map and draw it again, right? So she probably did 200 variations in 2 years, right? Now we can do millions in a couple of days. So what we do is the mathematicians randomly sample all the possibles, and they create a distribution. So that's what we're looking at here. This is the distribution of the outcomes. How many, what percentage would win Republican votes in Wisconsin of all the maps? These are millions. Look at these numbers. This is like 250,000 maps centered down the line at 55% of the seats in the Wisconsin House, basically. So the Republicans chose a map over here. Didn't it seem like you should probably choose a map? You got 250,000 you can choose from in this column, right? But you choose one that's more partisan. Seems like you could build a guideline that says choose something in there. So what do you think? If you were sitting on the Supreme Court, what would you say?
Given this
Huh? What's probably going to happen, and I'm not a lawyer, but I've read a lot of stuff, is that I give it a 50-50 chance that they actually rule on the merits. If they rule on the merits, it will be something very vague, and it will be litigated for the next 10-15 years on what that vagueness means. There's lots of, whatever your favorite issue is, there's lots of examples of that, right? So, my appeal to you is redistricting advocacy is not going away. We can be here for this session and 10 years from now. We can try to advocate for changing our commission so that independents are represented on that. Non-party leaders are represented. Citizen commission versus a bipartisan commission. Yeah.
I understand there was a big problem, or is a big problem in Eastern Washington, the Spokane area mostly, where there is a big Hispanic population, but they have never been able to elect a Hispanic candidate. Has that changed?
Yes. I know we're at time. Can you guys give me five more minutes? We can talk about Yakima and kind of wrap up?
Yes.
Okay. So Yakima's story is really interesting. It was not in my original slides, but I have this slide deck of 157 slides. Let's see if I can find it. So what happened in Yakima is the city of Yakima is 40% Latino. They had never elected a Latino city council person. So this map is backwards. The whiter, the more Latino. The darker, the more white. But it shows you that there's, eastern side of Yakima, there's a significant population of Latinos. So the ACLU, representing the citizens of Yakima, city of Yakima, took the city to court. They literally made a federal case out of it. The Voting Rights Act, 1965, you are discriminating against Latinos because they cannot elect the people they want to elect. The remedy is to make districts. So everybody was elected at large, and they kept electing white people. So they won in court. They created districts, and I think they've been in, that was a year and a half ago, November, 2 cycles ago. And here's what the districts look like. They now have 3 Latinas on their city council. So not only did they elect Latinos, they elected 3 women, which is cool. So that's an example of creating districts so that the districts can have their own personality, right? Now, is that gerrymandering?
Yes.
Yeah. But for a reason that in law we say is right, for people to have a voice. They can elect folks that they think will represent them better. And in this case, it's people of their same ethnicity. Yeah? Questions about that? Did that answer your question?
Yes, I
City
just had never
Yakima.
heard the outcome.
Yeah. Now, the irony of it is the taxpayers of Yakima have to pay the legal fees of the ACLU because they won. So there's a little bit of irony there. Okay, so let's just do a little redistricting advocacy. I have a sign-up sheet here. If you want to help me on any of these issues, please sign up with me. I will be sending out information. I'm going to have a meeting at the end of the month, or the beginning of next month, May 8th, where I'm going to have a conference call. We can all talk about what we want to do. So if you're excited about census stuff or redistricting stuff, please sign up. And, sorry, let me find my actual presentation. So here's what we need to do. Try to get the gerrymandering bill passed, the prison gerrymandering, anti-gerrymandering passed, and money for the census. Those are the 2 things I'm working on now. Try to influence the commission, figure out how to get the leadership to appoint women and people of color. do some administrative changes, like make the process more transparent, teach people how to testify in front of the redistricting commission, all that good stuff that the league's good at. Create a constitutional amendment to change our commission. And especially if you're technically inclined, help me draw some maps. We have to be 6 months ahead of the commission because our maps have to be ready for them to decide what their maps are going to look like. So that means we need help, we need technical help, we need outreach help, all sorts of stuff to do these. Are there any questions?
These are in order of go. You know what I mean? Now, do number one first. That's the most pressing issue, and then number two.
So these, yeah, in some ways I've laid it out here, right? Okay. These two we can work on right now. We got it right here. We have to find the candidates first, and then we have to figure out how to influence, right? Although it's going to be iterative. So these we can definitely work on. I didn't get anywhere this session because everybody's worried about census and budget and all that on changing the process, but we can definitely work on it for next session. Then we've got to make sure we hit, so it's kind of timing wise, we've got to make sure we hit this. Although I have to start now to figure out the maps, right? I do have a GIS company that's donating their services, so they're going to be doing all the technical data crunching, but no map's good unless we get people to buy into them, right? So we're starting now. So there's lots of things kind of working in parallel. Yeah.
So I've heard optimism from both of you, and I'm thrilled about that. I'm going to be optimistic. But one of the questions that both of you brought up as well is your, what keeps you up at night is lack of public confidence in the census and in politics in general, and with our current federal administration or state administration. So has anybody gone through their brain and think about, what campaign or what efforts can be made to increase public confidence? And is there any self-serving reason one would sign on to information confidence? I was just thinking, Mason County hates property taxes.
Yeah.
Do they use the census data to raise property taxes?
Sure, everybody's doing analysis, crunching. You have to know what you think your revenue is going to come into the county, right?
So is there any effort on the league's part or anybody's part to help people realize? I think you also mentioned community connectedness, that we all, faces all votes kind of thing.
I feel like I'm doing my part by talking to all of you, right?
Positive part.
You just put me over the 1,300 people I've talked to in the last 18 months, right? Just trying to get people, this is really technical. Most people are going to shy away. But I tell you, redistricting is interesting because everybody's skills can be used. If you're good at talking to other people, we can use you. If you like to sit in a room and crunch numbers, we can use you, right? It's amazing. So yes, I believe public confidence in our election process is paramount. And that's right up the league's alley, right? That's what we're trying to do. So my personal favorite as a slogan is "We've got your back." Right? People who are scared that the census is going to, okay, fill it out and we've got your back. People who are, trying to hack the elections, right? The league is trying to do post-election audit stuff to make sure that we confirm that our elections are good, right? It's kind of, that to me resonates, like whoever, we have privilege, I'm pretty sure I can say that in this room, that most of us in this room have a ton of privilege. And we have to get that sentiment out of, we've got your back. We are not going to tell you what to do, how to do it, but we've got your back.